Guru Radhe Radhe Guru Radhe Guru.
Hello and welcome. On this episode of My Time with Radha, I speak with Alicia about her time with Swami Radha. We speak about bridging worlds as Alicia shares stories of her childhood at the ashram and the profound influence of Swami Radha's teachings on her life today. Hi, Alicia.
Hi, Katie.
So wonderful to have you here. And we'll begin our talk together with the Divine Mother prayer.
O Divine Mother, may all my speech and idle talk be mantra, all actions of my hands be mudra, all eating and drinking be the offering of oblations unto thee, all lying down prostrations before thee. May all pleasures be as dedicating my entire self unto thee. May everything I do be taken as thy worship.
It's so exciting for me to have you in this conversational way here today, because I feel that out of everyone who I've interviewed, it's you and Clea who really offer this super unique perspective where, of course, from the very little that I know about your experience, you met Swami Radha at such a particular time in your life, especially in comparison to all the other folks I've interviewed. And so to start at the beginning, when did you first meet Swami Radha and what was that like?
It's hard to pinpoint because I was, I think, 6-ish. Both my parents have passed. Both used to live at the ashram, so I can't verify. I'm sure there's other people who can. So you're getting my story. I think it was 6 or 7-ish. And I think we met her maybe in the parking lot. So my mom's best friend had found the ashram, and there was this no internet, no phones, no, there are phones, but no, cell phones and stuff. But she had written my mom a letter saying, okay, I have found the best place. And my mom and her friend were seekers. They were always looking for something really meaningful. My mom had kind of left the Catholic Church after really being a deep part of the church and then feeling really let down, obviously, by things that had occurred. And so she was really a deeply spiritual person, and she was looking for a place for her kind of longing and purpose to land. I can see this in retrospect as an adult now. And so her friend was like, I've found this place. You've got to come. So we drove across the whole country and we went on this camping trip because we lived in Northern Ontario. And my mom's friend was doing the YDC. And so I have this one memory of us being in the parking lot and me being really excited that we're in this new place and this was the ashram and what was it all about. And I was just really excited to see my mom's friend, who was my godmother. And I don't know if I've made it up, but I feel like Swami Radha walked by, but I don't even know if that's true. That's like a glimpse, right? And I wouldn't have known what that meant really at the time. But over the next couple of years, because my mom started to kind of slowly get involved, Swami Radha came up north and gave some workshops. So I was at that 6, 7, 8 stage where she would fly all the way to Northern Ontario and do workshops with my mom and her friends, my mom and my dad and her friends. And so she was very much boom, on the scene. And I knew she was important in that I could see how much my parents were excited and interested. And there was a flurry of energy about her coming and the workshops that they were in. And I know from, talking with my mom, how powerful those first encounters really were for her. They were very electric and meaningful. And she just felt like she was being asked questions and being asked to kind of really think through her life and being challenged on kind of her base assumptions about what it was all about in a way that resonated with her. So that just trickled into the family, I guess. And so it was kind of this teacher grandmother vibe. From that kind of first introduction to the ashram, my mom's specifically, and
Mhm.
then my dad definitely like it was a lot of energy
Mm.
around the ashram and these teachings um and so they pretty quickly, like within a few short years, ended up going to the ashram and doing the YDC, and I was just 9. And that was kind of a big deal for a 9-year-old, to like move across the country, go to a new school in the middle of the school year.
Mhm.
And they would be going to class every day, and I'd be like trudging up the road, going, catching the bus and going to the local public school. So it was quite a
Mhm.
like deep dive. I didn't it it all happened in a way kind of fast. And then within a year of that, we moved to the ashram for good. Like we sold our house, sold our cars, sold everything, and moved to the ashram by the time I was 10.
Wow.
And then that's how it went. So Swami Radha was a hugely magnetic draw
Hmm.
for them. And we repositioned our whole life to for them to be able to like live in community and study with her
Mhm.
intensely. And I was a part of it, but I was also a kid, so I was along for the ride, but
Mhm.
I wasn't making those decisions, obviously.
And so when your parents, even from the beginning, decided to come here to the ashram for the YDC, and I say here because I'm at the ashram right now, so otherwise
Hmm.
I would have not said here, but um, was it just the three of you who made that move then?
Yes, it was the three of us. So they went into class in the morning. They would do their hatha practice, and they'd have someone else come in, wake me up,
Hmm.
and get me down to breakfast, and make sure that I got off to the bus. And then I would come home at the end of the day. They'd still be in class, and I would go to the bookstore, which
Hmm.
used to be tiny. It used to be in Shiva Hall. It was this tiny little
Right.
bookstore because half the ashram still wasn't built at that time. And I would go and sit with my one of the good ashram folks who ran the bookstore at the time. Her
Hmm.
name was Patricia. She too has since passed, but she and I became great friends. And she was at the ashram. She was going through cancer treatment.
Hmm.
And so I don't know, we had this like beautiful little end of day ritual where I'd go buy a chocolate bar and tell her my day, and she would tell me hers, and then my parents would come out of class and we'd go to dinner.
What a
That
normal
was
life
just
for a 10-year-old.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little weird, right? Because the ashram at that time was much more closed.
Hmm.
It was a much smaller community, and people didn't come and go in the way they do now. Like people can come in and just walk the grounds, and I think that's really great. I like the more openness. I like that people can come and see it and experience it without, coming for
Hmm.
5 months or something,
Hmm.
which is a lot for people. But at the time, people really came and they stayed.
Hmm.
And so there wasn't a lot of like people going in and out of town, or like it was quite more of a closed retreat
Hmm.
style. And so really at that age, I was one of the few people leaving. I was maybe the only person who left every day
Hmm.
and went to school and had this whole other world, making friends and trying to be a 9-year-old and 10-year-old in the world, and coming back into this whole other world, which was this community, which, has this whole other energy
Hmm.
happening. So I was from a young age kind of navigating these spaces. And as I made friends, sleepovers were weird. Like I'm like, okay, we eat in a buffet. And by the way, like there's 40 of us here,
Hmm.
but we do live in the Kootenays, so alternative lifestyles weren't 100% strange, but it was still something I had to navigate, talk about,
Hmm.
talk with my friends about, talk with the ashram about. Like they weren't used to like, hey, this kid's having a sleepover or a birthday party and she's having 4 girls come over. How are we gonna,
Hmm.
support that happening?
Hmm.
I was a bit of an anomaly in the system.
Hmm. And what role or what kind of presence did Swami Radha have at the ashram during that time when you kind of first moved here, first for the YDC and then a little bit more long term with your family?
It was like peak
Hmm.
Radha, like 70s, 80s. Like she was definitely there. A lot, like she lived there. She traveled a lot, so she would come and go.
Hmm.
But, we all ate together in the dining room. Like she used to come to dinner and she taught and she would meet with people and she would meet with me. I mean, she was a huge, undeniable organizing spiritual force of the ashram.
Hmm.
And she had class with all the residents. So, my parents would go off to class and come home. And so I would be there, debriefing with them. Like, what happened?
Mm.
Or they'd have dream class or they would do different things. And um, I was very privy to the kinds of questions they were reflecting on, the kinds of things they were talking about. Um, and then that got translated to me and at my age and level because my parents were pretty, you know, interested in how my spiritual self was developing at the same time.
Hmm.
So she was very active in the community, very active with my parents, and I think very active in their parenting in terms of really making them think through their choices with me.
Hmm. And do you remember sort of like your initial or kind of ongoing impressions of her when you were at that age?
Yeah, I mean, she had kind of an electric personality. Like anyone who met her, like you knew you were like it was never boring. Like she has had a very present energy or presence. And of course, I knew this was someone very important to my parents. And
Hmm.
I knew she had, they thought so highly of her. So I was very aware of that. She also, I mean, just by my age, she did have like a grandmother vibe, of course, like
Hmm.
with giving me candies or like asking me how I was or just, meeting me where I was at in terms of what I was interested or what was happening in my life. She would, you know, be very kind
Hmm.
in that way.
It's interesting to hear you like talk about her giving you candies, and all I can think of is like Gurudev Shivananda and the stories of him with the candies or the nuts in his pocket and handing them to the village kids, and even Swami Radha. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we used to have satsang in many mansions at the time. If we had a big satsang, because the prayer room only held so many people, we
Hmm.
didn't have a temple at the time. And I would often fall asleep in satsang. So she would say, come sit near me, come sit near me. And then she would like pop these candies in my mouth during satsang. And she told me this time, she's like, I have to do it too sometimes. Like
To stay
keep her
awake.
awake. But so that was kind of fun. And then she would also say, in the company of the wise, which is satsang, and in the presence of the divine, you don't want to fall asleep. Anyway, so she intervened with her candies to keep me awake.
Well, and then, already you're saying like there wasn't a temple and the gift store was in Shiva Hall. And now me here at the ashram, like so much has changed. And you in your life have witnessed all of that change. And I'm curious as to how sort of your involvement and your presence here has changed over the last, like, what is it, 30, 40 years?
Yeah, it's such an unusual thing because the ashram itself is only 60 plus years old, right? So I've really evolved alongside
Mhm.
the ashram, the physical ashram, and then even the teaching approach. Like it's changed very much over the years, and I've been had a front row seat to it all. And so, yeah, I feel like I've been a part of many different eras, as it were. And those early days of it being quite insular, kind of close and
Mhm.
closed, so where people would come and study for a long time, and it was I'd say more intensive in the kind of guru disciple type of teaching that she had received. And then that shifting over the years as I think the ashram matured and as more teachers were available. And then, yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think Clay and I, like as a kid, we ran around together. Like I lived there all the time and they came always for the holidays. So, we had this incredible privilege and we really got to do whatever we wanted because we were so safe that the adults were just like, great, you do you in the best way. So we just had this crazy free reign to explore and build things. We'd go to the shop and build stuff, and then we'd go to the beach and go swimming for like 5 hours, and then we'd make things, we'd make up plays, we'd create stories for each other. Like we just had this very rich, creative child life that was very much protected by the ashram folks. And they were so everyone there treated us with so much respect and cared about what we thought that when I actually moved out into the world, I was sorely disappointed with the state of adulthood. I had been given such a gift of being treated so well with so much respect that when I went, because I ended up going to boarding school after a few years of being at the ashram, I had no idea this is how adults were. Like they were kind of mean and aloof and reserved, to be honest. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. And that was partly why I went away to school, because Swami Radha thought it was a good idea that I actually understand more about the real world. She was a bit concerned that I was too protected in this kind of bubble, and I wanted to go. So there were reasons why. But so there's like these stages of being a child and really evolving alongside with that kind of close knit support. And then as I aged, or as Clea and I aged, like we started bringing our friends, and then they started a youth program. We were the ones coming home, and then we were bringing people, and then suddenly there's like 10 of us all in our 20s or teens, and they're like, well, we should have a program. And it just kept evolving like that, and then creating opportunities for us, like Ascent magazine, or like I worked with Ascent for many years with Clea, and there's a co-evolution that has just, I can't distinguish myself from it. So as the ashram grew, we grew. We added more buildings to the ashram. We added more programs to the ashram that felt, appropriate to things we would engage in. And both she and I spent different times of coming back to the ashram for years at a time. So, I've run the bookstore, I've been run the kitchen, I've been in hospitality, I've done every job. I've been the treasurer of the ashram. I've run one of our, Ascent magazines as the publisher for many years. Like I've done a lot of, I know kind of our work and our teachings. And then when Swami Radha died, that was a huge pivotal point for the ashram. And that was now a long time ago, but at the time, it was this great unknown. I was only 24-ish when she passed. And it was like, what will happen? Like, what's going to happen to the ashram? Like with this founder and the spiritual teacher, like, who are we going to become? And there was a lot of questions. And like, part of me even thought, my parents are going to implode. Like, what is going to happen to them? What's going to happen to our family? Like, they were fine, by the way, but like we were all fine, but there was this transition that happened, and the ashram went through this big transition. And then when Swami Radhananda kind of came into the picture, because she was Clea's mom and my pseudo mom, we evolved with her and her direction and what she brought to the ashram. She kept us close, so I'm on the board now. I've been on the board for many years of the ashram. Like I'm very interested in how it continues to evolve from those very early days of walking up and down the road to school to, how are we a refuge in the world for people who are really seeking clarity and purpose, agency? These teachings have a lot to give people in a time when it's getting increasingly chaotic and unpredictable. But also, what is the world calling from us? And I think that's something that my generation, is interested in, not just how can we be this thing and people can come to, but Yes, and what is it that we do to serve back out and connect back out into the world? And that's super important.
Yeah, and I think what's really incredible here is, you mentioned this coming back home and the ashram being, the literal world translation being spiritual home. And so for so many here, that's what it is. It's a spiritual home. And yet for you, and I think for other people over time, perhaps, but for you, it has always been like your home, like your family home since you were 7, 8, 9. And that is just such a unique experience. And to have been able to share that with Clea, like I can just only imagine the sort of bond that you two share and sort of that intimacy and trust and all the learnings that have come with that to have this place be your home.
Hmm. Yeah, it's almost no one else understands it, really. So I have a shorthand with Clay that I have with no one else.
Mm-hmm.
And we both bring our different gifts to the ashram, and we both have those gifts have been built through the ashram, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
just this like endless kind of circle of how that works. And home, it is home. So it's like it's home. I still, of course, like if you're going to your family home, you're like, oh yeah, I remember whatever, ABC
Mm-hmm.
memory. Like it's impossible not for me not to feel the whole history all the time. And that is actually a blessing and a curse sometimes
Mm-hmm.
to see it with freshness when I have this whole 40 years of history. I have to notice how that's unfolding for me because there is such a strong sense of this is my place and it's not my place. It's both. It's
Mm-hmm.
everyone's. And that was, as a kid, that was always something that was, interesting for me because my parents were teachers and senior teachers and there for many years. And so they were my parents. They're mine, but they were everybody's. And we would have to talk about that as a family. Like when you have parents who are in service of others in that way, well, things don't always go the way I want them to, and they don't go on the family schedule of a normal family. So there was always some tension there of this, what is mine and what is everybody's? And it's still like I have I'm finely attuned to the collective. But sometimes it takes time for me to go, okay, and what do I want and think? Like just me.
Right. You as an individual, not you as the child of the ashram or your parents. And I'm curious, we talk about this like family home, spiritual home. I wonder if there was a moment for you in your own kind of evolution and your own growth where there was a shift between, oh yeah, the ashram's a place that I lived in and blah, blah, blah. And then it was, oh yeah, the ashram is where I have certain teachings that I follow and kind of that sort of connection, if there was ever a moment where that kind of occurred.
There was. It's a slightly painful actually memory of mine, but definitely all as I was growing up, Swami Radha always used to say, "This is your home, no matter what happens. You have a place here, always." Right? Like if you get in trouble or something happens, and whatever, you've got a home, you've got us. And then that changed when I was early 20s, and she really started to question me and say, "What do you think about the ashram? Like, what do you care about the ashram?" About what we're
Mhm.
doing here. Like she really changed in terms of wanting to, I guess, create some distinction between that child who grew up here and the adult and what is it that I was seeking and wanting or giving in relation to the ashram. And so it was actually some tough conversations that we were in at the time because that was very confusing to me because it felt like a real 180, right? I'm like, wait a minute, you said I can always come back here no matter what. And in one of our more spirited conversations, she was like, well, no, you can't. If you can't come back here, if you don't think, yeah, if you don't respect or care for what we're really trying to do, and do you know what that is? And so that was pretty confrontative, and I was on the defensive. I'm trying, like, I've given, like, there, I think from a child's mind too, it's like, I've given my parents, I've shared a lot, I've shared everything. So there was that part of me that felt like, now you're asking for more, or now you're asking for what? Like, what is happening? It was a very distinctive time in those last years. She knew she was going to be passing away. Like, she was coming to the end of her life, and she was in some pretty straight and abrupt conversations with many folks, and me being one of them. And so I kind of felt like, I don't know why we're talking about this. Obviously, like, I care about the ashram. It's my home. Like, I don't know why you're saying this, but of course I did deeply reflect on that. And she also asked, if your parents weren't here, what would that mean, like, for you? And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, how could they not be here? And now here I am. Like, my mom passed away young, from cancer. So that, like, unforeseeable things happen. And in some way, I was more prepared for my relationship with the ashram because I had thought about it. And it was after the year after she died, I decided to come back after I graduated from McGill and spend a year at the ashram and go, okay, fine. Let's figure this out then, you know? A little bit of like defiance, but also coming right into the center to figure that out. And that's always something that I have done when I'm really feeling unsure or rebellious or defensive or just questioning. I tend to come right back into the middle to do it. It's an interesting thing that I've noticed about myself. It's like I want to test, can I test the boundaries and can you handle it? And yeah, every time I've been given all the room in the world to like are these my beliefs or are they my parents' beliefs? Do I think these teachings work or not? Do I think these, what do I think? Which is a total legacy of Swami Radha. She was explicit about asking me that question and saying it was important that I find out. And so it's kind of a perfect circle of teaching me this way of thinking and examining and not just taking it all for granted and not just taking it all just because like it sounds good. Like light a candle, it's all going to be fine. Like I don't believe that. So I've really come home to kick the tires of my own values and my own beliefs, and they have fallen apart at certain points of my life. And I've been like, all this is hogwash. I don't know what's going on, but I come right in the center to do it. And so there's an interesting dynamic of being held while I find the next place of clarity for myself. I really have taken the time to investigate whether this is supportive and meaningful to me, this way of moving through the world with these particular practices and this particular community.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like she really ignited this sort of fierce compassion towards you of, well, what do you think? And what does this place mean to you? And I can imagine it being kind of like a rocky juxtaposition between that and this is your home and you're always welcome here, to what is this place to you and why are you here sort of thing. And it kind of, I think, leads me into our theme for the day. And you've already kind of touched on this, on kind of what the teachings mean for you and what the ashram means to you and how they've become part of your life outside of being here in this physical space of the ashram. And so the theme of bridging worlds and all the worlds that you inhabit as a person, as an individual, but then also as someone who's deeply, deeply connected to here and to Swami Radha. And so I have a little quote actually from the archives that I found about bridging worlds. So I'll read that so we kind of bring Swami Radha into our conversation, even though she already feels very, very here. She says, "The human voice is a bridge between two worlds, not only between your lower nature and your highest nature, but also between a world of chatter and one of utter silence. How do we use the powers that we already have?"
It's a good one.
I mean, I feel like even that last question, that question that she asks here, how do you use the power that you've gained through all your years here at the ashram? And also, what does bridging worlds mean to you in the context of your relationship with Swami Radha and the teachings?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I mean, I love bridging worlds. I think from that girl who walked up the road between the two worlds of, the going to school with everyone and then coming back into the ashram where people were asking these types of questions of each other every day
Mhm.
and talking about it at the dinner table because we used to talk at dinner then. I've always been going between worlds of this kind of deep introspective, you know, who am I? Who do I want to be? What are my choices? What are my agency? Where do I find courage? Where do I
Mm.
like how do I really see the world for what it is, not just what I want it to be? These really kind of deep questions that are kind of evergreen, like they're
Mm.
always useful questions into the world of, you know, consumption and
Mm.
extraction. And I mean, I love both worlds, not consumption and extraction, but it's just a very different, my parents kind of gave up everything and moved into the woods at the ashram. And I like being in the world and translating those types of questions, these kinds of ways of thinking about life into our everyday living um, outside of the ashram. I've made a whole career of it. I mean, that's literally what I do is work with organizations and people about how they want to work better and differently with each other and with themselves. Like I've 100% taken what I gained and translated that into the world to meet people where they are because they can't all come to the ashram and nor do they all want to. But these kinds of questions are still really meaningful for people of like, who am I? Who do I want to be? Even in organizations, well, what influence do we have to create a place where we can really feel proud and in service of what we're trying to achieve? I guess I was kind of surprised again when I started working in the world at how dissatisfied and unhappy everybody was. And I came from like working more collectively and harmoniously, even though people fought and stuff, of course, like we work it out,
Mhm.
but that's just it. We work it out. Like that's part of the learning process. Everything is part of the learning process. And when I went into the world, into organizations, I was like, oh my God, people are they're here all day, every day, giving so much. And they're not everybody, but like enough are really unhappy
Mm.
and kind of reinforcing these systems that don't feel empowering. And I was like, I know there's another way. I've lived another way. And so I directly translated that experience into what I do every day. And that is a bridging of worlds. And something that I really loved about Swami Radha is that she was never not herself. She was deeply authentic, but she could change the language to meet the context.
Mm.
So if she was talking to folks who were running a business, she would use business language. If she was talking to two swamis, she might use different language. If she was talking to kids, she'd use their language. And she met people where they were, but the intent and the intention of like deeply connecting with your higher self and having that come to the fore in service of whatever it um, was what she did. And
Mm.
so I very much took that as an example, and I can do the same. Like
Mm.
I can speak to a lot of people in a lot of different ways, but from that same sense of like, what really matters to you? And what do you want to do about it? And how do you get there? And how do you tap into your, innate beauty and strength to do that? So I think bridging worlds has been my jam forever. I love it. And
Mhm.
I like the puzzle of it. I like trying to figure out how to how to get into these real spaces with people in
Mm-hmm.
their particular context. And I think she was a huge driver of that.
Kind of this connection between how you bridge your own worlds, but then also how that inspiration kind of striked through seeing Swami Radha and the ways that she bridged the worlds between sort of the spiritual, like medical people or scientists or
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of people. And I think if anything, if I've learned anything, and I've learned a lot through this whole podcast series, is that
Yeah.
she connected with such diverse people and individuals who were all interested in different things, who were different ages as yourself and Clea,
Mm-hmm.
and yet she bridged all those worlds and inspired so many and continues to do that, maybe not in the physical sense, but through her legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that that's just, I mean, no words really. It's just awesome in the literal sense of the word.
Yeah, she had a voracious curiosity and intellect, and
Mm,
I loved it. And she would say, like, find out for yourself. Go read widely. Like, don't just take things, like practice them. It's like what she did with the teachings. She took every mantra and she practiced and practiced and practiced. Like, is it true that they have power?
mm,
It wasn't just, hey, these have power. Okay, great. No, like she didn't work that way. She went and found out. And she was unusual because she would actually go find out. She put
mhm,
in the work to go find out.
mhm,
Like thousands and thousands of hours of spiritual practice to see if these approaches were worthy, if they lived up to their promise. And then
mhm.
she would say, well, don't take my word. Like I can tell you that they work, but you have to go find out for yourself. And I think that's entirely woven into my operating system of that curiosity of wanting to understand, of wanting to know, wanting to connect, and really wanting to ground in meaningful questions that help us connect with each other, that help us connect with ourselves, connect with our higher self, to make life really rich and meaningful. It's endless. It's like endless possibility with that approach.
And as we kind of begin to reach the end of our conversation, there's one thing that's like buzzing in the back of my head, and I just have to say it. I talked about it with Clea and sort of that idea and that belief that when someone in your family takes initiation of sannyas, how blessed all of the generations to come and the generations before have been. And so just thinking about you and your life and your early kind of exposure to this place and the teachings and just how like inspiring that is and how incredible it is that you've been given this gift, even if it's been challenging at times. And sort of
Mm-hmm.
now hearing about all that you've learned from it and all that you've kind of done in your life as a result of it. How does that make you feel like today, thinking about it in that way?
I mean, it was hilarious. My mom took sannyas when I was 16, right? And I think that was one of her selling points, honestly. Like she was like, as a joke. I mean, I was like, oh, I mean, this was not the top of my list for my mom to do. But oh, of course, I don't know what that all means, but I love holding it lightly in its beauty of that sentiment of being blessed by someone's commitment and support and
Hmm.
single focusedness, because it's unusual what both my parents were initiated into sanya. So I get the double do. I've got a lot in my bucket and I feel very grateful for that.
Hmm.
It comes with its own tensions, as I said, like 16-year-old is like, really, what am I going to tell my friends? Like, I can't tell them this, like what's happening. And simultaneously knowing I will be blessed through this,
Hmm.
through your calling to go deeper. I can see that and I can support that and I can fight that and have feelings about that. But I definitely feel like I'm deeply grateful and blessed for what I've been given. And I have to say, like, it's wider than it's what Swami Radha created. She created this community that we got to live in. And going back to that sense of when we were kids and we could just kind of run wild, and that people really like when they stopped us on the sidewalk and we'd have real conversations, like if we said what we were doing, even if we were swimming all day, really tell us, like, why is that so exciting? Like, what are you up, like real intention and presence with us. I think we got like our whole buckets full, being held in a respectful, cared for way that has only allowed me to move into the world in the way that I can and that I try to do. And I try to pay that forward in everything that I do because it's such a gift. So it wasn't just from Swami Radha, it was from everyone who came into contact with her that created these spaces for us to feel seen and worthy. And I now have enough years in this world to know how precious that is. And so it's not without its tensions, but I'd take it over anything else.
Yeah, and really what I'm hearing is the kind of length of support that you received through your parents' promise, through Swami Radha, through this place and this ashram. And I guess my final question for you, and you've already touched on this a little bit in speaking about your role on the board and as treasurer and all these roles that you've kind of taken up throughout your life for the ashram. But how do you support Swami Radha's legacy now? And what are your hopes for the future of the ashram?
Oh, where do I start? I want the ashram to survive and to thrive and to be somewhere that people can come, be held, have that same experience of people taking you seriously, asking you real questions, meeting you with presence, offering you tools so that you can have your own agency and figure out what really matters to you. I can't think of a better thing. So of course I will do everything I can to help the ashram, move forward into the future. I don't know what the ashram has its own energy. So what does it want? I don't know. And I have to be open. Like, we are not the only ones saying how things will go. We have to listen to what wants to occur, what wants to unfold. And so I think we will do so. I'm very concerned about things like climate change. Like, will people even be able to come? What will the world look like? I think it's very relevant. And it's not for everyone, but for those it is deeply transformative. And I see even more need than ever for places like the ashram or these teachings. So I guess we'll see how that unfolds. I mean, we've gone through several transitions in the past. Like I said, when Swami Radha passed, I thought, oh, that's the end of this. Like, what's going to happen? And you never quite know what's going to happen. But then this whole new phase unfolds, and the ashram really grew over those next 20 years under Swami Radhananda's leadership, and the teaching style changed, and the kind of inclusion of youth and young adults, became, really important. And now Swami Lalitananda has taken over, and she's got her own version of like really making sure that we are aligned and in tune and growing, whether it be, better understanding our indigenous, the land that we're on and the connections that we are making to, being trauma informed to, just really keeping us current and relevant. And so I don't know what the next unfolding will be. I feel decently sure I will be there to see and support it, but I'm open to what it wants to be, as long as it keeps the essence, of this kind of. I wouldn't want it to see it watered down. That would be my only flag. But it'll evolve into its next generation, and I'm kind of, there's always a bit of fear with that, like, because I love how it is, and there's excitement with that. What could it be? How will it look? What form will it take next?
Well, I look forward to seeing and supporting the future of the ashram alongside you. And I'm so
Yay.
grateful for you for having this conversation with me amidst your very busy schedule and all your ways of bridging worlds. So thank you so much, Alicia. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Thanks for asking such great, big, deep questions. They really made me think, and I feel like I could talk for another few days, but this is this is beautiful. Yeah, I really appreciate your doing it.
Thank you, Alicia. Namaste.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Yasodhara Ashram is located on the unceded traditional territory of the Tanaha and Sinixt peoples. You can learn more about the ashram by visiting our website at yasodhara.org. You can also follow us on Instagram and YouTube. Until next time, I'm Katie Taher, and this is My Time with Radha.